Hello, and welcome to S.T.E.A.M of Consciousness, a program presented by the ARI Podcasting Network and hosted by George Koperna. What is S.T.E.A.M? S.T.E.A.M stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Mathematics. During each episode, we will take a few minutes to sit down with professionals in different STEAM-related fields to give them an opportunity to share their story and give their perspectives with the goal of promoting career awareness to potentially interested students, young professionals, and of course, anyone else who shares a fascination with these areas of study. And now, please join us as we tap into the STEAM of consciousness.
Good morning. Welcome to STEAM of Consciousness. Today we're really pleased to be joined by Kate Ryan. Good morning, Kate.
Morning.
Kate, you're an independent consultant and with a chemical engineering degree. So what's your day-to-day look like?
So right now, my day-to-day is kind of a mix of kind of managing my household. I have 4 kids under the age of 12. So I managed quite a bit as far as those activities go. And then I mix that in with a variety of different calls with different groups on topics on reservoir engineering or business performance or operations for different oil and gas companies. So I kind of get to mix it around and not necessarily have a full 9-to-5 job right now, which has been nice.
And I know your degree's in chemical engineering, but when you talk about reservoir engineering, did you ever think when you were getting your chemical engineering degree that you'd enter the petroleum industry and be a reservoir engineer?
So my first, funny story, my first resume to get my internship said that I really wanted to be an environmental engineer. I really wanted to do that, but I am a first generation college student. So my process for getting internships my sophomore year was to apply for everything. Anything that would take a sophomore. I applied, I did all those things. And I interviewed with a lot of different companies, but I actually interviewed with Burlington Resources back in the day. Eventually got bought by ConocoPhillips, but interviewed with a wonderful guy there. And he spent all this additional time with me and convinced me that working in upstream would be a great idea. And did an internship in New Mexico that summer and just loved it. Like it just kind of, from that point on, I came back to school and kind of joked with some of my friends who did maybe more downstream or environmental work, and they did not seem to have nearly as much fun as I did. So it just kind of stuck with it. So
Fantastic. It's amazing how when you have that right mentor, how things can just click. And that seemed to work for you.
Oh yeah. And it's been the story of my career. I've had just fabulous mentors, just really fortunate to be surrounded by people who just wanted to teach and, and really inspire me to just do different things. And that's been the story of my career for sure. Absolutely. It's just great people who wanted to see me succeed.
So if we were to spin the clock back just a little bit and look at high school Kate, did you always think, boy, I want to be a chemical engineer? Or was it something else?
I went through phases like just any teenager does. So as a freshman, I made all-state band for the bass clarinet, which is my husband likes to tease me relentlessly about it. But I was sure I was going to be a professional bass clarinet player. Just to be clear, there are not very many of those. It is not a lucrative career. So really quickly kind of dropped out of that ideal. And then my dad was first generation college student. So my dad was an engineer by trade. He wasn't by degree. And I always loved math and science. So I knew I wanted to do something kind of in a science field. I actually wanted to go to school for chemistry is what I wanted to do and be a teacher. That was my goal, was to be like a high school chemistry teacher. My dad told me he would help me pay for school if I put engineering on the end of my degree. And my dad likes to tell people that Kate is not a quitter. So Kate does not quit things. So I just kind of stuck with it and ultimately really liked the mix of chemistry. I really like the mix of science and the problem solving. So I think that just pure science wouldn't have been as thrilling for me as engineering was. But that's how I ended up in the chemical engineering department. As Dad said, just stick engineering on and I'll help you pay for it. So
well, that's the best kind of mentor, right? A parent with deep pockets or deep enough.
Yes, exactly. Just shove you in the right direction. Like you'll figure this out. No worries.
When you were in high school or you're thinking about college and obviously I know where you went, go orange in some ways.
Mhm.
Were there choices, or was it always just, I want to go to the University of Texas?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually toured, the only schools I toured were out of state. So I wanted to go out of state. I went to WashU in St. Louis. We went and toured Columbia. And my dad worked in paging for 25 years. And when I was a junior in high school, he lost his job. So he was a layoff just because of the obsolescence of paging, in the early to mid 2000s. And he got a nice severance package and everything ended up working out. But at the time, as like the oldest and like trying to be as responsible as possible, I said, okay, I'm going to pivot plan, just apply to state schools because it just made more sense. At that time, now college is inflated to be ridiculously expensive, but at that time, anyways, out of state or private tuition it was a huge step up. So I pivoted and just applied to tech and to Texas. So Texas Tech and then University of Texas, just trying to look for state schools. My dad asked around, like with his friends, like if you were hiring an engineer, who would you hire? Like who would you more likely hire from, Tech or Texas? Because we didn't know anything. Like it's so crazy to think now because there's so much out there, and like most people's parents went to college. My parents we had no clue. We had no clue like rankings of university. We didn't know any of those things. So he asked and they said, Texas. And then I had some friends because I grew up in Dallas. So I had friends going there too that were in my calculus class. So we all just kind of like, okay, we'll do this together. We'll go do engineering at Texas together. So that's kind of how I ended up there. And I actually did summer school the summer before my freshman year at West Texas A&M out in Canyon. So out near Amarillo. Wonderful program for like first generation college students. So I got free tuition. I was able to take 3 or 4 basic classes for free.
Oh, wow.
Great atmosphere, like small, like big fish, small pond feeling, right? Like you're out there, like it was a really cool environment. And then I went to orientation at Texas and I was terrified. And I had a choice even then. It's so crazy to think all the choices you have, but I had a choice even then. They said, look, we'll accept you to a general engineering degree at West Texas. Um, Full tuition paid, all these things. And my dad, like to his credit, was just like, look, you make your decision, either way's fine, you just make your decision. And I ultimately decided to stay at Texas. So I had another decision point there too on where I ended up going to school, but stuck with it and went to Texas.
And the tools that I'll say kids, but rising, college freshmen have now are just so much more immeasurable than what we had. And I'm older than you. You can tell by the haircut. But I think I had 2 petroleum schools that I could choose from that were local,
Mm-hmm.
Penn State and West Virginia. And
Mm-hmm.
I ended up going to West Virginia. And I think my tuition the first semester was $800 a semester. Unheard of now. If you go to West Virginia, that you'd be like really happy to have that.
Oh yeah.
By the time in 4 years I graduated, it tripled. It was like
Mm-hmm.
$2,500 a semester, and that was just in 4 years. And
Mm-hmm.
so I know what it is now because my daughter just recently graduated with her engineering degree. But yeah, and so it was nice. It was word of mouth. It was going out and kind of seeing what was out there that people knew. And I think what I understand from Texas Tech in Texas, the size of Texas is just ginormous. It was
It
ginormous
is.
then. It still is.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of students versus Texas Tech, which is out on the plains
Mhm.
and very windy.
Very different. Mm-hmm.
So culturally speaking, Austin's a great place to be a student, I would think. Um, as you were working on your 4 years there, you mentioned your sophomore year, you went anywhere you could go for internships. But were there any kind of, you're entering your petroleum years probably at the end of your sophomore year, beginning of your junior year after you get out of your prerequisites. How was the transition into chemical stuff?
Yeah, it was interesting. So my first, they have these again, I had no clue. It's so silly to think about it now, George, because like kids know, like, but I had no idea like that there was like a weed out class was a thing. I didn't know grading on a curve was a thing. Like these are things that I just didn't know from high school engineering class I took. I really liked it, but it was hard. And I took the first test and I got like a 64. I remember it vividly, like a 64. And I was sobbing. I called my parents. I was like, I am not meant for this life. Like, why in the world would anybody think I could do this? And I went to, luckily, I used my resources. So I went to office hours for the TA. And I went and talked to the TA and said, I don't know what to do with this. Like I've got 64, like I clearly don't understand the material. I clearly am lost. And he's like, you got the highest grade in the class. You are fine. And I was like, excuse me. I was like, time up. How is that possible? Like there's 100. He's like, no. This is the way this works. He's like, we throw just stuff and things. And like, that's the point of this is like to make, because some kids will see that and they just will be like, this is too much for me. And they'll be done. And it's better to do it now than to do it like, 2 or 3 years down the road, or God forbid you like get into a career you hate, like those types of things. Um, so that was kind of my first experience with it was like, okay, here's what it looks like. And that was interesting. And then I had a semester where I took a lot of credits and I took like transport phenomena, which was for
Mhm.
me, what's always been harder was physics, like more physical based concepts, like visualizing in 3D. Which not to be like sexist, they say women it's can be more challenging for female brains, but physics like chemistry, give me fluid flow, I could do that like all day, every day. But if it was like a physical, like a beam moving or like some kind of like it was very difficult for me. And that one I actually ended up having to drop and take again the next semester because I just with everything I was taking. And it was really interesting. This coming from like a super straight A student, like I have always been like I follow every rule. I know this is shocking for you. I am like a straight A student. I love like challenging and being the best and competitive. And the idea that in order to finish my degree with a great GPA, I had to drop something like to be able to have the right amount to carry through that semester was like looking back such a great life lesson for me to like to be able to say like look sometimes the way to get there looks different for you than it looks for somebody else like just because they say this is standard classes everybody takes like perhaps you need to kind of piece it together in a way that fits for you better and ultimately that worked out really well. It felt like losing at the time, like for me it felt like failing, like oh I can't get, but ultimately it worked out fine. But there were classes that were hard for other people that were easy for me. Thermo, I loved. Organic chemistry, I loved. Like there were certain things, and then there were ones like those that were harder. So we tried to find different groups of us. So there ended up being like 3 or 4 of us in the chemistry class of like 60. We would study together, and that helped because it was like I had a couple guys that were really good at one part, and I was good at others. So it was good to bounce things off of each other and not feel like you had to carry it all on your own too.
Yeah, and you hit on a couple key concepts, and I think a lot of those engineering concepts and classes, they'll teach you the basics and then test you on those exams. And my engineering dynamics, motion, statical
Mhm.
motion, was the same way. I was in a class of 70, and they first test they came up and they wrote 100, 72, 65, and 48 on the board out of, and those were the 4 highest scores on the test out of the class of 70. But what they were trying to do was train you to think about things in a problem solving kind of way.
Mhm.
And it's an adjustment. And those entering engineering, I think, highlighting your experience in mine, is, I think it's still done to some degree.
Mhm. Mhm. No, and I
And
think there's like, and especially like I have a really good one of my best friends went to med school, so she's an OB-GYN, and it's really just interesting the different education she got going through medicine versus through engineering, because like a lot of it, like it's more traditional memorization. It's more traditional, like there's a lot of that piece of it. Whereas like mine from very early on was just like, here's the pieces, you figure out how it fits. And it may fit multiple different ways. And then the best professors we had were ones that had, and now it's like it all makes sense, but we're ones that had worked in industry and come back because you could see that whole idea of like, oh, but you're missing huge pieces of information, right? Which, like, the problems that you typically solve in school usually have all the information you need ultimately, but as we know, that's not the case in the real world. So.
No, and it's I think it's really informative to students that are entering these curriculums that, hey, be prepared to be tested in some way.
Mhm.
And I think most engineering programs, and you hit on this second point, you carry a lot of courses in each semester.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
sometimes you need to balance that. Um,
Mhm.
I know I did. 18, 19 credits every semester, but
Mhm.
you don't have to do that
Mhm.
necessarily. Um,
The other thing, I have my nephew, he's going into his junior year of high school, but he was talking about doing chemical engineering at Ohio State, is what he ultimately wants to do. And he's doing really well in high school and taking all these AP credits and like college credits. He's like, oh, Kate, it's gonna be great because like I'll get all my general education out of the way. I'll get it all out of the way and I'll be able to do this. I'm like, oh, time out. Don't get it all out of the way. Like keep some of it. You're gonna want something in your day that is not just absolutely like just and that's and for me, like I had some college credits, but not all of them. But it was able to mix in like history classes, and I took like an architecture class, and like that to me. And I'm more of a like I have interests that span far beyond engineering, and so for me, it was really helpful because it felt like I was getting a more well-rounded education and didn't feel like I was constantly like. And when you get in these engineering classes, which are 50 kids, it can feel very competitive, especially by like junior year, like because you're all going for the same jobs, you're all like it feels very competitive. So you want to give yourself some space, I think, for other things, like other classes. Getting all the general ed out of the way can help from a financial standpoint, but I think it would make it difficult. I would fear it would make it difficult to kind of just slog through.
so in some ways, you're cross training your brain, right? You can't just be doing math, hard calculus all day,
But you're
every
also
day.
talking to somebody who went like through a technical path and then became a manager. So everybody who's like technical listening to this is going to be like, she's management now. That's why she thinks you need to know other things.
So, in the petroleum curriculum that I was in, and it's since changed, maybe for the better, but we had to take physical chemistry, which is
Mhm.
basically, for those that don't know, a mix of calculus, entropy calculations, and chemistry. And
Mhm.
the instructor literally said, I see there's 10 petroleum engineers in here. It's going to be very challenging for you. And so, you'll have those tough courses in your curriculum that you're going to have to take, and you need to make headspace for those.
Mhm.
And so you said you got an internship your sophomore year. And
I did.
so as you moved into your junior year, how did you go about thinking you had cast a pretty wide net, you said, in your sophomore year?
I
How
did.
was it in your junior year? Was it a wide net again, or were you more focused with what you were choosing?
So I interned with Burlington. I actually ended up interning with ConocoPhillips because they bought Burlington before I actually started my internship that summer. So I interned with ConocoPhillips. Funny side story there. So my grandmother worked for Phillips Petroleum for 36 years in Bartlesville as a secretary. So she was the secretary at Phillips. And she loved Phillips with like every ounce of her being. And so when I got the internship with Burlington, she called me and said, like, at least you're not working for that ConocoPhillips. Because once they put Conoco in front of Phillips, like she refused to go to lunch, she refused to go to the building. And then she had to like, eat her words and call me back when we got bought. But I ended up getting to see her, like go and visit her in like Bartlesville a fair amount. So that worked out well. So but yeah, so I interned with Burlington in New Mexico, doing production engineering. And then I decided instead of just like immediately accepting, so I interviewed with other E&P companies. So I had narrowed it down to E&P companies. So I interviewed with a few other E&P companies, but not, they have spaced it out more now, I think, George. Back in the day, like in my day, everything was really competitive and the intern classes were big because this was before 2008, 2009. So everything was big. And you would get your offer before you left for your internship for that summer, for the next summer. They'd say, like, here's your offer for next summer. And then they would give you until like mid-September. it would not give you a lot of time to like investigate your options. So I ended up, they told me I could intern in Alaska the next summer after my junior year. So I ConocoPhillips did. And so I said, okay, I'll go to Alaska for the summer. That seems like a great idea. So I did my second summer, I did that, and I did facilities engineering for them. So I actually worked Prudhoe Bay stuff. So I did Prudhoe Bay gas sales, of all things, like that keep coming around and around. But I did, analyzing Prudhoe Bay gas sales as a non-op partner for what was BP at that time. So I did that for a summer. They gave me more time after that internship. And so I actually, probably the widest net I cast again was for full time. So I interviewed with quite a few companies for full-time opportunities after my, at the beginning of my senior year.
So was there, so many of the people we've talked to on this pod and Stream of Consciousness have gone on to get advanced degrees. Was there some consideration in your book to kind of go, boy, I'd like to get a master's degree or a PhD, or I'm done with school and I want to be out in industry? What was the choice like?
Just, as a first generation college student, it did not cross my mind in school. I'm also, very type A. So like after my first internship, I paid for all of my books for the next year because I said, Dad, like I'm going to pay for all this. And then after my next one, I paid for all my housing and my books. So I was like slowly weaning myself, right? So I had already like got this whole plan together. And then I was going to get a job. And then when I got my offer, my dad was like, I was probably 35 before I made this much money. Like it was one of those like just really big full circle moments. And so I never, because for me, getting a bachelor's like in my family was a big deal. So I never really thought of it. And then I did my first performance review because I ended up going to work in a technology organization for ConocoPhillips straight out of school. So everybody was 30 years into their career, had PhDs. So I went to work in a technology organization. I did my first performance review, and the manager said, I cannot believe we stole you away from getting a graduate degree. Like I am just still shocked that like we were able to get you away from doing a graduate degree because like, and I just didn't say anything and I nodded, and then I got and called my dad after, and I said, Dad, do you think they know that I was broke? That I just needed a job? You do not tell them that. You do not say that out loud. You do not, like, you just nod and say yes. And I can't believe you did either. So I just never thought, like an MBA. Like I love school. Like I love learning. I love all those things. And so I've thought constantly about different opportunities along the years, but never really. Probably the least was like when I was graduating. At that point, I think I was ready to work.
And did you get that offer for full-time employment at the end of your internship before your senior year? So that helps a little bit, I think, in this process.
No, it definitely did. And I think that helped a lot. I think I had built a lot of relationships too. Like, again, it was a little bit different. Like my intern class was 25 people in Alaska that summer, of which most were graduating seniors. And I think all but 2 got offers. So we were and I think most of us accepted them. So it like kind of felt like there was momentum at that point. And then some of us, like half of us were returning from the year before. So there was just so much like the atmosphere. It felt like we were making almost group decisions, to some degree just because there were so many of us going into the industry, which is just so different than it is today.
Yeah. It's so nice the way they have that set up, that when the oil and gas industry is working forward and all things are on an even keel, that system is quite nice for students. It really does that leverage to kind of relax and just focus on your year and not worry about what do I still want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
So we started at the beginning. We talked a little bit. You're no longer at ConocoPhillips, obviously, and so you've worked through some changes. And what kind of advice might you give people out there that are looking at navigating those changes?
I think so I use a lot when I coach people, when I coach younger engineers, when I coach younger employees, I use like a worksheet or a concept around motivations. Like what motivates you to come into work every day? What are the things you love doing? And like early in your career, you're not going to know. You're really a sponge. And I always tell people early in their career, just say yes. So like things, say, yes, I'll try this. Like, hey, can you do this project? Yes. Like, yes, so many things, George. I had no clue what I was doing, but I figured it out. Like I remember going to the library multiple times to find books to figure out how to do my job. Like I just figured, you just say yes. And I have had so many employees since then who like that is the trait. For an early employee, like just saying yes and being willing to give it a try and stretch and say yes to things that maybe feel beneath you, and then say yes to things that maybe feel a stretch for you. And like it's the fun space of the early on, which is like there's so many things that you can catch and learn and listen to. And then the motivation piece comes in as you kind of click through that like 5-year mark. It's hard. I find that there are a lot of people like in that kind of career, late 20s, early 30s right now, who really are focused on the ladder. Like you get a lot of people who say their goal is to be C-suite. Like I will tell you, as someone who has done career development for 50 people for 5 years in a row, like 50 early career engineers, I would say a good portion of the early career ones wanted to be C-suite. That was their goal. And although like an aspirational goal, I don't know that everybody like, what does that mean to you? And what are the things that you really enjoy that you think being a C-suite employee, like a CEO or a COO would really give you? And so a lot of times I try to like distill people down to their motivations because I've had a lot of success. I had an employee for a long time who really wanted to be a manager. That's what he wanted to do. That's what he wanted. I'm telling you, this guy did not want to manage people. He thought he did because it was a pay raise, and that's what he thought but like,
Yeah.
and it took a lot of like, okay, what makes you want to show up to work? It's like solving hard problems, doing this, doing this. And then once we got him into an advisor role, it was like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to sit in a room and have people respect me and respect what I have to say. But I also just want to be the one at the end of the day who's like solving things, seeing the data, checking the things, which once you get into management, you don't do. And so a lot of times, like that motivation, checking in with that every couple of years can be really important because it can be important for whether you stay at a company. It can be important if you go to a new company. For me, I've moved for a lot of different reasons. Like I moved from a big company, at ConocoPhillips to Chesapeake, because at ConocoPhillips I planned and planned and planned and planned and never did anything. Like I never drilled a single well. I never, and it was really cool. And I learned like basic reservoir engineering, like all these techniques. And then I was Chesapeake and I did and I did and I did and I did and I never planned. And that was like for me, I really felt like at that stage in my career, I needed to do. I needed to like be a little reckless. I needed to, and it's silly the things you learn, like royalty interest. For a massive company and all these big units all these years, I didn't know you need to be worried about that lease to lease, like the silly things that you need to learn by putting yourself into different situations. Um, and then but like for me, it's always been about chasing like a really exciting opportunity, like something that's challenging and interesting and fun. And I think at the end of the day, like having people around you that really believe in you. So I have a really networking. So this is a really, I will touch on my thoughts around networking. I think this is probably everybody's like, okay, you have to have this big network to move between companies. You have to know a lot of people. You have to go to all the SB happy hours. You have to do these things. I am not a traditional network because I find small talk like really challenging. And as an engineer, that's probably not shocking, but I find like that is very difficult for me. And it was actually our mutual friend, Mike Blinko, who really introduced me to this concept of networking as just building relationships with people you work with and asking, like building deeper and deeper relationships with people you work with or people you come across in different organizations, like that you've worked in on projects and caring about them and checking in on them. And that for me has just really has made networking so much easier. So I have people that I talk to that I care about, and I talk to them regardless if I need something or not. And it has created this great, for me, what feels like just a comfort zone in the industry that like I have people looking out for me. I have people who care about my well-being. And it didn't come across like through LinkedIn. It didn't come across through happy hours. Like those are things you can use, but I think people underestimate like just when you're in your job, like building the relationships, like reaching out to someone to be a mentor, like at your work. Like, hey, can we meet for coffee once a month? Um, hey, do you mind if we chat about this like problem I'm having on like either this presentation or this meeting? And I'm really comfortable having those conversations. It's the useless small talk. And so for me, that's worked a lot better for to create that network to make those decisions than any what I always thought networking meant.
And I just want to echo what you said, because I think you've put a real bright light on the way I feel about it too, in a lot of ways, that going to these meetings and having that small talk and knowing that there's probably an ulterior motive on the other end of that. And there may be not, I feel that they may be not as genuine as they're
Mhm.
coming across, and that they could very well be. Look, it's but you got to be cautious. So, but I think there's a lot of nuggets there, and I think you've got a little bits of piece of advice for students and early career professionals throughout. So let me close with this. What do you love about what you do?
So many things. I love solving problems. I love coming up. I love, so what I love about reservoir engineering is I love that you can take something down to the nuts and bolts. Like all these problems have the same nuts and bolts. And you can take it all the way down and you can build it back up. And this is somebody who's done, simulation, so modeling for a lot of my career. I love like I feel very confident now at this point in my career that give me any reservoir engineering question and I can boil it down and I can build it back up and like we can figure out a way to solve it. Like to me, I love that part of it. I love that like solutions have to work. You can't fudge your way through a solution like in
Mhm.
engineering, right? Like because the physics like entropy, like these things have to all line together, right? So you have to be able to say, okay, the marble will come and fall this way. I like that part of it because to me, there's always like a check to it, like high to low pressure comes up more often than you would think. Like these are the things that that I like about that. And then I love that the industry continues to reinvent itself. I've done fracking, I've done horizontals, I did, steam assisted gravity drainage, like with heavy oil in Canada. I did, CO2 EOR before it was cool, enhanced oil recovery before it was cool, and then now CCUS and, then EOR again. And so this whole kind of, constant reinvention, using the same skills. And then, for me, I love developing people. Like I love being around really intelligent people and pointing them in directions they would never have pointed themselves. That is my favorite thing to do is be like, you have the potential to do this, and making them just really uncomfortable in the process. That's my favorite thing to do. Is just be like, you have so much more potential than you think you do. Like, try this, and that has been really fun because I think that being able to identify that early and to like, create those safety nets and push people, yeah, I think that's probably my superpower, and that's what I love to do most. That's my favorite part about it. So
And that's fantastic. And that was advice you gave yourself, to always say yes, stretch
yeah,
your capabilities, test
I'm
yourself.
much better at making other people uncomfortable, George, than making myself uncomfortable. So, but yes, I mean, it's so funny. You think, especially as engineers, we all think we have a path. Like, and they'll tell you that from the beginning of school, like that you're going to do this. And then they'll tell you that from the beginning of, especially if you work for a decent sized company, like that there's a path. Like everybody will tell you that there's no path. There's no path. There's no one size fits all. Like everybody's very different, and there is space in this industry for everybody, which is the cool part for me. It's like there's space for, and I love being around them. Like I love being around the super smart people who would never want to manage anybody. And then I like, and then I love the project managers who just want, like it's just there's space for everybody.
And that's a great way to end. And Kate, thank you so much for taking time today. This has been Steam of Consciousness, a podcast on the ARI Podcasting Network, produced by Ryan Kessler. Thank you very much, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to listen to new episodes of Stream of Consciousness, available on your preferred podcast listening station.